Welcome back, everybody. Hope you managed to get some lunch, some refreshment during that short break. Now, our next speaker, I'm delighted to introduce. If ever someone speaks to our sense of purpose, it is our next guest, Mark Russell, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Children's Society. Mark, your words on the Society's website include, and there are several of your words on the website, but they include, I want children and young people to know that someone cares, someone listens, and someone will help so that they can thrive, not just survive. And I suppose that message has never been more important than it is now, has it? I know in your talk you were brief to talk to us about being the CEO, but you are also going to bring us some direct knowledge from work that you as the Society do, from children's perspective, about what things are like for them now, who they are, what they want, and what they need from us. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, Mark, and over to you.
Thank you, Jane, for your very kind introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to join you. And hello from Northern Ireland, where I have the privilege of giving this talk today. I hope you had a great lunch, and I'm really grateful as well to Michael for headlining my speech in his excellent keynote early today. As Jane says, I'm Mark. I'm the Chief Executive of the Children's Society, and in this incredible role, I have the privilege of leading around 800 staff and 10,000 volunteers who work right across the country to support some of the most disadvantaged children in our country. We run over 70 different services that support young people with mental health issues. We support young people facing exploitation from county lines gangs, young people facing neglect or abuse, others who are young carers, and we support young people who are young lone refugees as well. I have an absolute privilege to work with an incredible team of people who work so hard to support young people. Let me give you a flavour of what we achieved over the last year. Our teams worked directly with 11,500 young people, with over 3,000 parents and carers. And in our systems change work, we reached over 23,000 young people and 14,000 professionals. A number of years back, I had the privilege of meeting Desmond Tutu, who said that it's really important to fish drowning people out of rivers, but it's also really important to go upstream and stop them being pushed in. And our work doesn't just transform the lives of vulnerable young people. We work really hard to change the systems that trap young people in disadvantage. Alongside that, we run campaigns, and we have an excellent policy and research team who translate the issues that we see in the lives of young people every day into concrete actions that we call on government to bring about change. Over the course of the last year, our policy work has had 4.4 million policy impacts on young people. Let me give you just one example. We all know that young people are struggling to get on the housing ladder because of the sheer price of housing in this country. But what happens if you're a young care leaver and you leave care at 18? There is no family support network to stay with. There are no parents to lodge with till you're 30. And so that is why so many young people who are care leavers end up homeless, because the system isn't there to help them. So over the last year, we've worked really hard to persuade government to change the housing benefit rules for care leavers. And just before lockdown, I had coffee with the Minister for Welfare Reform, who told me that he'd been persuaded by our arguments. And as of the 1st of April, every care leaver aged 18 to 25 had a significant uplift in their benefits, thanks to the work of our team. So I'm really proud to do what I do, and it's a real privilege to be with such an excellent group of people today. My background is, yes, I'm a chief exec, but my background ultimately is that I'm a community youth worker. I was involved in the run-up to the Good Friday Agreement here in Northern Ireland, and I was a youth worker in England as well. So my experience is in community grassroots youth work. But I'm very conscious I'm speaking to an audience of chief executives and other senior leaders from school academy trusts today. So let me say one thing right at the start of this address as one senior leader to another. I know how you feel. I know it's hard work to be a chief exec at the best of times, but to be a chief executive in 2020, blimey. I don't know about you, but nothing in my leadership toolkit, nothing I ever read, no course I ever attended, ever prepared me to lead an organization through a global pandemic. It's felt like we've been throwing down the railway track as the train is hurtling at high speed. In our organization, we had to reconfigure, reshape, redesign every single service we provide to children in the space of about. At the same time, we had to move our entire organization to home-based. We had to close our 106 shops, so we lost £1 million a month of income. And I don't know about you, but the number of nights I've had lying in bed, awake, wondering about what was going to happen, the impact on our team, the impact on young people. And I'm sure you, like me, have had your fair share of sleepless nights. So if you remember nothing else I say in this speech, which is more than plausible, I need you to remember this, that as a chief exec of a children's charity, I'm saying to you as chief execs of Academy Trusts, thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for caring for the young people that you serve. Thank you for providing support to your teams. Thank you for all that you've done to try and do the right thing. And I am sure, like me, you are nervous about what the months ahead will bring. So let me throw a couple of quick things that I've learned over the last couple of weeks as a chief exec that I'd just like to share with you. The first thing is to be yourself. Lead as you, not as the person you think people need you to be, but be authentically you. Speak authentically, speak with empathy, speak with emotion, so people really do know you care. As someone once said, be yourself, you're not qualified to be anyone else. The second thing that I've learned really through this crisis is you cannot over-communicate. Openness, transparency, and honesty is genuinely, absolutely always the right thing to do, particularly at times like this. As a wee boy, my mum told me that I should always be honest because it was the easiest thing to remember. And the third thing I want to say, and I really want everyone to hear this, is it's really important to look after yourself. No one needs their leader burning the candle at both ends, or as someone else told me once, cutting your candle in half and burning it at all four ends. Take time for you. Take time to be refreshed and renewed and restored. Do things that give you life and energize you, to build your resilience for God knows what the season ahead of us holds. When I was a youth worker, long before Microsoft electronic calendars, my boss was called Sean in a town called Lurgan in Northern Ireland, and he used to put his diary on the wall in the office. And every single Monday, come real rain or shine, and in Northern Ireland you could have all of that at once, he would write, Sean is on a course. It wasn't a health and safety course, it wasn't a safeguarding course, it was a golf course. Every single week, every Monday morning, he was on a course with 18 holes and a coffee shop at the end, because he knew he was better equipped to lead when he looked after himself. Your instincts will be sharper. People will feel safe around you because their leader knows they're practicing what they preach. So it's a real privilege to be with you today, and I want to talk to the main theme I've been asked to speak about, which is the issues facing young people. And so perhaps I could have my PowerPoint at this stage. I wonder if you ask the average person on the nearest high street what comes to mind when you think of the term well-being. Well, some might say it's mindfulness or meditation or yoga. Some might even mention a pret-a-manger kale smoothie. What if we asked that question inside your school? A teacher might say it means less marking and less work. A senior leader might use terms like a whole school approach to well-being, or making sure we've got the right designated senior mental health lead. But what if you ask the young people in your classrooms, what would they say? What might well-being look like for them? As my next slide shows, the Children's Society have been asking this question for 15 years. We've been asking children directly, themselves, what does good well-being mean to you? We've asked them in interviews, in surveys, in focus groups. And in asking this question, we've learned a lot. We've learned that children's well-being is as complicated as adults' well-being, that there are a whole range of factors that matter. Some of them might feel like common sense, but others can be more surprising. So in order to understand what we mean when we talk about children's well-being, the Children's Society have created the Good Childhood Index, based on consultation and testing with thousands and thousands of children across the country. As my next slide shows, the Good Childhood Index measures children's overall life satisfaction. And it does so by looking at 10 different domains in their lives, which our research has shown are crucial components to children's well-being: family, friends, home, health, time, school, appearance, choice, future, money. And as you can see from this, and as my next slide shows, the two most influential factors on children's well-being are family and choice. Now, we all know the importance of core family relationships in our own well-being, but sometimes I think we can underestimate the amount of importance that children place on this, particularly when often children only talk to their parents in monosyllables or grunts. But actually, children desperately rely on strong family relationships. But they also depend and rely for good well-being on strong choice. And so often, for all the right reasons, adults can frequently make choices on behalf of young people, or we can let them make their own choices from a very limited range of options. In doing so, we deny their voice, we deny their agency, and we limit the opportunity to hear from them and respond to them and to their needs. So over the years, the Children's Society has sought not just to raise the importance of children's choice and voice and autonomy at individual level, but also to place the voice of children at the centre of the public debate about the future for young people and children. That actually it's not just about attainment or obesity or antisocial behaviour or violence or mental health or safeguarding, not even about child poverty. Instead, our Good Childhood Report every single year seeks to give voice to young people, to let them say what matters to them, how they feel about their quality of their lives. So how do they feel? Next slide, please. Well, the good news is that the majority of children in this country are happy with their lives. But as you can see from our slide, the best data that we have shows that since 2009, children's well-being generally has been in decline in this country, and the proportion of children profoundly unhappy with their lives has grown significantly. The data in our report shows that children are more and more unhappy as each year goes by. And this data allows us to look at how happy children are with 5 different areas of their lives. And the data shows a significant decline in children's happiness with their friends and, most recently, more so with their appearance. But the children also tell us, which is good news, that the area that they find most happiness in is with their families. But what do children think about school? And as leaders of education, you might be keen to know what this is all about. So on my next slide, this is what it tells us about school. So over recent years, we have seen a sustained dip in children's happiness with school. At the same time, children are reporting being unhappy with school. They also are not particularly happy with school work. So we've been asking children about that, to ask them why. What are the driving factors to explain why children feel like this? And children tell us in our discussions with them that sometimes school culture, sometimes discipline measures, sometimes bullying, sometimes stress, sometimes they feel judged on what they're wearing or on their appearance, and sometimes they don't feel they have enough choice in the subjects they study. I mean that for some young people, and an increasing number of young people, school is not always an enjoyable place to be. On the next slide, there are some of the quotes children have told us. I think people do expect you to do well in exams, and it just adds more pressure when you're trying to do them. Sometimes things like shoes break and you've got to get more, and sometimes you get detention because you're not wearing the right uniform. Or if you go to school and you don't wear your uniform properly, you can be judged and stared at. And if you can't afford nice stuff, you can be bullied. But we wanted to know, how are British children doing when we compare to other countries? So this year, in our Good Childhood Report, we've looked further afield. We wanted to know whether specific trends in children's lives in the United Kingdom that were matched or otherwise in other countries in Europe. As you can see on this rather depressing slide, the United Kingdom ranks lowest for the proportion of 15-year-olds with high life satisfaction. Interesting to know what goes on in Romania and Finland and Croatia and Switzerland, but they're at the other end of that table. So looking at that graph, the number of children in the United Kingdom who experience high life satisfaction is the lowest in Europe. As you can see in the next slide, or sorry, on the same slide, back one, in terms of sense of purpose, you can see again, young people are at the bottom of the pile in Europe. On the next slide, we're a bit higher up on the happiness phase. Well, that doesn't mean happiness all the time. That means that children over the course of the last year say they've experienced happiness at some point, and we're doing okay there. But rather more scarily, on the other side of that slide, you'll see in relation to sadness, children in the United Kingdom are pretty much near the bottom. So why is this? Why are children in the United Kingdom more sad, have less satisfaction, and less sense of purpose? Well, we have tried a number of hypotheses to understand that. And we find there are two key drivers. On my next slide, please. The first thing is we have found a strong sense of evidence of connection between life satisfaction and fear of failure. Children in the UK had the greatest fear of failure in all of the countries that were assessed, and at the same time had the lowest life satisfaction. Now, we want to do some more research into this, but we cannot ignore what these numbers tell us. They cannot ignore the link to pressure and fear of failure to low life satisfaction. Now, I wonder right now who you're thinking that applies to. Are you thinking that means your highest attainers in your school, those who are performing really highly, who are working incredibly hard, who place themselves under incredible pressure, or perhaps their parents place them under incredible pressure, and that the assumption is that they're feeling that fear of failure immensely? Yeah, that's true. But that our research suggests that there is another group of young people who are afraid of failure, and that's those living in poverty. Our previous research, which is on my slide, called Poor Mental Health, in that research, we found the clear link between child poverty and mental health. And we have proven in our research that children living in poverty are more likely to feel a failure, they're more likely to feel hopeless, and they're more likely to feel that they are falling behind other children. They don't live in the right area of town, they're not wearing the right trainers, they haven't got the right phone, and they feel entirely inadequate when comparing their life to the life of the other children. So we have a problem. Because on one hand, we have an education system, and I realize that's not your remit, it's the government's remit, but we have an education system that puts so much pressure on children and young people, that has an education system that focuses the entire attainment of a child on one or two key exam results in that child's life, which stresses out a significant number of young people. And on the other hand, we have a society where child poverty is growing year after year after year, and children growing up in low-income households don't feel optimistic or hopeful, and they feel they lack any chance of agency over their future. We're about to publish a report in the next couple of weeks called Moving, Always Moving. And it's a report about the impact of housing insecurity on some of the most vulnerable children in the country. And I want to tell you today about one of those young people. I want to tell you about Ali. Ali is 9 years old, and Ali lives in a small flat on a busy main road. Ali has met our researchers on a number of occasions, and he always wears a permanent grin and a jumper with arms that dangle below his fingertips. Ali was born in a fishing village, and he was born in a village where his family have been living for generations, a village where sugarcane was plentiful and cars were absent, and the breeze was so warm you could eat ice cream every day. Ali came to England with his mum when he was a little boy, and he now lives with her and his younger brother in a flat on that busy main road. His mum worked part-time in Lidl and studied part-time at university. Ali wasn't quite sure what she was studying. And he and his little brother went to primary school. Ali was in year 5, and his brother was 3 years below him in year 2. Ali thought that his family and his mum are really nice. He told us about going to a supermarket to get some food, and his mum took him for a surprise detour to a certain well-known sports shop where she bought him a new pair of cricket shoes. Ali had worn his old pair until his toes were squished. They were then passed to his younger brother, who outgrew them, and then they were thrown in the bin. Ali didn't have cricket shoes for quite a long time. It was his favourite sport. He wanted to be a professional cricket player, but as he pointed out to his mum, that wasn't going to happen because his mum couldn't afford the fees for him to join the cricket club. When Ali moved to England, he was too young to remember and too young to know why they had left the Asian village with all of that ice cream and sugarcane. But he knew from what his mum had said that they'd started life in the east of England and then moved to the other side of England a very short time later. Then they moved to another city, miles away, then to another city, even more miles away. That's where Ali had started nursery. Then he moved to another neighbourhood where he met our researcher for the first time. Ali kept wondering, why did they have to always move house? Ali's current flat was very small and very noisy. And when they first moved in, the boy's bedroom was at the front, overlooking the busy road. And he couldn't sleep. So his mum, despite the fact that Ali shouted at all the cars and told them to stop, they still kept coming. So his mum moved the boy's bedroom to the sitting room at the back of the house and moved the sitting room to the bedroom at the front. Ali and his brother shared a single bed. And one of them would always end up on the floor with no covers because they used to fight all the time. When our researcher met Ali this time, they were due to move house again. He wasn't sure why they were moving and he didn't know where they were going. He was scared about that, and so was his mum. It was springtime, and all he knew was that they had until June to find somewhere else to live, and his mum didn't know where, and they'd already started packing things up. Ali was worried about what that would mean for his school and his friends. He was worried he'd have to move to another town and couldn't stay local. His mum was worried they couldn't find a landlord who would accept DSS. Ali had no idea what that meant, but he knew that his mum was very worried about it. Ali's mum didn't want to move, and neither did he. Typical story of the uncertainty that children in this country are facing. Ali knew that they could end up in a neighbourhood where he would know nobody, in a house that would be too small, that he would have bad neighbours or a bad landlord, and he was frightened that they'd end up with no home at all. He was worried that people would be mean to him at school because he didn't live in a nice house. We heard umpteen devastating stories like Ali. The fact is, as of the 31st of March this year, in the United Kingdom, in the 6th biggest economy in the world, at the 31st of March this year, 60,000 households with children are living in temporary accommodation, like Ali, with no place to call home. We've heard stories of families never emptying suitcases because they were never sure how long they'd stay. You cannot disconnect the well-being of children in this country from the reality of poverty that too many children live in. Living in poverty, living in poor housing, dependent on a food bank, creates the conditions where children's well-being falls. And I don't know about you, but it shouldn't depend upon a footballer to shame our nation into feeding starving children. The facts are simple. 4.2 million children in this country live in poverty. Let me say it again. 4.2 million children. I'm currently sitting in Northern Ireland. That's 3 times the population of Northern Ireland are living children in poverty. And when you look at those graphs where Britain is at the very bottom of the pile in that international league table, each of those countries has seen child poverty decrease over the last 10 years. In this country, it's gone up by 4 percentage points. And I got slagged off in the Sunday Times the other week by a columnist for daring to have the temerity to suggest that the increasing levels of child poverty in this country had a direct impact on the well-being of our children. So, my friends, as we watch this, you've given your lives to educate children because you care about young people. You want them to have the best possible start in life. I hope, like me, you're outraged by these numbers. Because what that means, 4.2 million children, is that's 9 children in a class of 30 are living in poverty. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Well, I think we have to rethink how we support children and how we support young people so that our education policy in this country can reduce economic inequality, or at very least mitigate its consequences. That we need to poverty-proof the school day. We need to reduce the cost of school uniform. And my own organisation has been working with a Labour MP to bring a bill through Parliament, and it's currently at its second reading, to reduce the cost of school uniform. To provide access to technology for low-income families. To expand the provision of free school meals. To help reduce inequality and improve children's well-being. I believe with all my heart that well-being should be the heart of our education system. That I think that the current environment we're now in with COVID-19 gives us a chance to press the reset button on our educational system so that we can promote both good well-being and excellent educational attainment. That children's well-being at school and achievement at school should not be seen as conflicting priorities, but instead inextricably linked. And this can be done by helping young people have better opportunities to take part in activities that increase their well-being, like art or drama or dance or sport. It's really important that schools understand the emotional needs of their pupils, and measuring pupil well-being would ensure that support is targeted to those who need it most. The Children's Society have a good childhood index, which can be easily obtained from our research team, who are very happy to advise you on how to use it in your school. You're a chief exec, and so am I, and you're thinking, blimey, there's so much to do. Yes, there is. I understand that. But it's not something you do on your own. We do it together, all of us. How can you, though, as a leader in education, help shift the dial in the schools you lead to help us all turn around these damaging trends? All of us working together, government, the third sector, schools, we can make a difference. You have a massive platform as school leaders and a voice that you can use for good. With all of the autonomy and freedom you've been given as academy trusts, also comes responsibility. And I know you care, or you wouldn't be giving up your time to listen to me. But I genuinely believe we have a real opportunity to increase outcomes for children and young people. So I challenge you to raise all the boats in the harbour, because we have a collective responsibility to improve childhood in this country, and education is a critical part of that. So I want to suggest 3 things. Firstly, I want to encourage you to look outwards, because well-being is contextual. It's a product of the communities we live in and the contexts we find ourselves in. Of course, within your classrooms, you can control so many things and make things better, but your school is part of a community. And so I really want to encourage you, I'm sure you're at this already, but to make even bigger efforts to join your school together with communities to ensure that together, all of the different systems that impact on vulnerable children are making a bigger impact on their lives. Hillary Clinton was right. It takes a village to raise a child. Secondly, give children opportunity to use their voice. As our research shows, children often feel disempowered, even for all the right reasons. That schools have tried to make things easier for them, but in doing so can disempower them. So I want to encourage you to give children opportunity to use their voice, to listen to young people. Don't write the rules of engagement before they enter the room. Don't present them with predetermined choices, but give them the power to make their own choices, to help shape your school life, to challenge you and to challenge your team. Even, dare I say, give them a budget to spend. Put young people's voice and young people's agency at the centre of your school, to let them be part of the system that governs their lives and their well-being. My view has always been, as a youth leader, when you empower young people, they respond with enthusiasm. And finally, I want to encourage you to challenge your own understanding and your team's understanding of what well-being is. That it's not mindfulness or yoga. It's not a whole school approach to designated mental health needs, whatever government policy might say. What is well-being? Well-being is the basics in life. It's the stuff we need to thrive. Well-being is attachment and belonging. It's finding your voice and being heard. It's the joy of learning new things. It's the joy of feeling safe. It's having a decent place to live, freedom from hunger and fear and exploitation and abuse. Friends, I think it's scandalous that children's well-being is going down in this country. I think it's scandalous that in a rich country like ours, too many children live in poverty. So what am I doing about it? Well, I can tell you that the Children's Society is not prepared to sit by any longer and watch children's well-being decline year after year. So we've just set our organization's goal for this decade. So working with our friends and partners, and I'm sure that includes you, our goal is that by 2030, we will have overturned this damaging decline in children's well-being and set a path for long-lasting growth. I promise you, I am going to make sure that my team throw the kitchen sink at this over the next decade. That we want to ensure that no child is forgotten, that no child is left behind, that every child has the right to thrive, not just survive. Children's well-being is about children being able to fly. Children's well-being is about them being hopeful for the future. Children's well-being is feeling safe emotionally and physically. Children's well-being is knowing that they're loved. A friend of mine loves to sail. And when he was a student, he did some work experience on a cross-channel ferry. And as the boat was going from Larne to Stranraer, the captain told him if he changed the dial of the ship by just 1 degree, just one, within an hour, that ship would be miles away from where it would have been. Ladies and gentlemen, in our work as educational leaders, as leaders in charities working with children, we have the unique privilege to change the dial of children's lives 1 degree at a time. And as that child hits 20, 30, 40, 50 years of age, the difference in where they've been and where they could have been becomes greater still. I believe with all my heart, we have the power to transform the trajectory of the lives of the most vulnerable children in this country. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can ensure young people's voices are heard. Together, we can make sure that children live happier, better lives. Together, we can change the trajectory of children's lives into a more hope-filled and optimistic future. And the Children's Society will join you on that mission to make every child's life better. Thanks for listening.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much. I've seen comments coming in on the message board, actually, to say thank you so much for such a heartfelt and, if I might say so, authentic contribution. It really was. And I think that it was terrible to hear Ali's story and to hear how many multiple anxieties that poor child was living with every day. But you also have given us a sense of what we might do about this. Now, before we get on to that, we've got some great questions here for me to ask you, if that's all right, about what we might do. Somebody's asked about, I mean, that study you did was kind of without the COVID overlay. So somebody's asked here what you see as the biggest risk to children's well-being now and in the months and years ahead. And in the absence of a national strategy, what do we do about it?
That's a really important question. Thank you for that. We published a report in July this year, which we entitled Life on Hold, which was a very quick study of the impact of copying. And in our previous study, we'd found that 1 in 8 children were reporting being profoundly unhappy in this country. And during the COVID crisis, it had moved to 1 in 5. Mm. So a significant number of people, young people, feeling more unhappy as a result of COVID-19. Mm. My biggest fear through all of this has been closed schools. Mm. And I sit on a conference call with senior officials in the DFE every couple of weeks and we've been talking about this right the way through, and the absolute determination to get schools open, because as colleagues on this call know, time and time again, schools are our eyes and ears as a society on the most vulnerable children in the land. And throughout this crisis, the number of referrals and CAMS in safeguarding have gone down because those referrals have not been made by schools. So I think all of us are concerned now that schools are open, that over the next number of months, that stuff is going to emerge in young people's lives that's going to produce a real spike in need for us as a society. And honestly, I suppose my other big fear has been that we were making real strides as a country to reduce the attainment gap between the most well-off children and the least well-off children. And my fear has been that, throughout this crisis, if you're living in a decent home with decent Wi-Fi and maybe a parent who's got a few hours to help and a decent computer, the impact of this has not been has not been truly awful. But if you're living in a 1-bedroom flat and mum's a key worker and you're a single parent family and you've got no Wi-Fi and no computer, the impact on those children's lives is colossal. So I think as schools are coming back, I would really encourage colleagues on this call to encourage teachers to really be listening to children, because we don't really know what's happened in their lives in all of those months that schools were closed. Who's experienced abuse or neglect, or who's witnessed a loved one die from this awful virus? So what we're encouraging people to do is on the back of our Good Childhood Report, which is, by the way, completely free of charge on our website. So please go and read it. As Michael very helpfully said in his introduction remarks this morning, it is the best piece of intelligence for schools to use. It's completely free. Go use it. But we're asking people on the back of that to contact their MP to demand that the Prime Minister places the well-being of children as a strategic national priority. And so I would encourage everyone on this call to go to our website, click the button, send your MP an email, and let's together raise our voice to challenge the government to make the well-being of children a national priority.
Yeah, and I think people will want to do that. And I've heard lots from trust leaders and school leaders about the emphasis they are putting on listening to children now that they're coming back into school and now that they've been back into school for a couple of weeks. But the school leaders and multi-academy trust leaders are also putting a very high priority on well-being, as we've talked about. And you have given us some very helpful challenges here, because you've said there are helpful and unhelpful interpretations of well-being. I mean, we know it's not all about yoga, lovely as that might be. But I think what I heard you say was that what schools can do in terms of well-being is give children the love and security, that safety net. But also there's something about exposing them to experience which supports achievement, like the arts, like sport, and giving them agency. Now, we've had a couple of questions about, do you know of schools where they've balanced this attention on well-being and achievement? You might want to say that. But whether you do or not, can you just tell us some more about how you strike that balance between offering richness and ensuring achievement and strong outcomes?
Thank you. I mean, that's really important. And I think that balance of holding well-being and attainment together as actually mutually dependent, I think is really significant. And I have seen schools do it well. And, my team have seen schools do it well, where children are, the messaging that children hear is that, yes, schoolwork is exceptionally important, and your sense of hope and how you feel about life inside is also really important. And schools who can get that messaging right, that children feel that it's okay not to be okay, and that actually there are support structures in place to help them if that's what they feel. When children hear that, then they respond. And what we're worried about is that too many children will internalize the concerns they've had or the stuff that's happened to them in recent months. And so schools giving young people a chance to talk about that openly. I want to say something about the pressure that teachers face. I mean, I used to be a school governor. So I come to this as a very, very dear friend of teachers and the education system. But I was a governor of a special needs school in Sheffield, and I know the pressure that teachers are under. What I don't want people to hear in this message is that somehow I'm adding an extra set of responsibility onto teachers to be responsible for all of this stuff. It's about body language. It's about messaging. It's about the vibe that is in a classroom, that actually the school is interested in that child's entire experience of life. And children absorb that. And that's not something you can action in terms of, do you want to publish this document and it does that. It's an ethos and a culture that children feel and absorb. And children who've told us about that will talk about schools that they know they're cared for and valued and loved. And those are the schools where children from even the most difficult backgrounds will thrive, because they know their whole person, their intellect and their well-being are being nurtured really carefully.
Thank you. I'm pausing in a sense because you're giving us so much to think about and ponder on. But I'm thinking that's what we can do internally. We've got a number of questions about the external, and you told us to look outward. So I'll give you sort of two questions wrapped up in one. One is, what can we do to encourage our communities to be more exercised and involved in supporting this. And the other, and this has come in a couple of times, are what can we do about partnership with the Children's Society? So there you are.
Thank you. Two brilliant questions. I'm a massive believer in community, and actually, I think I'd like to challenge schools to realise that they are real leaders in community. Schools. We've got examples of schools we work with around the country who are doing way more than what government think they're doing. They're basically providing a wraparound service for some of the most vulnerable children in the country, running everything from support centres to food banks to youth centres, all under the one roof. So, by dint of a school's size and its geographical location, schools really can be leaders in the community and can be glue to bring together a whole range of other disparate groups from around. So I really want to encourage schools to step into that space, because quite frankly, there's not a lot of leadership coming from anywhere else. To step into that space and to own it and to name it, because that's how we help all of the community provide the right context for children to thrive. And I suppose part of it as well is there's something very profound when children become arrested with issues to do with justice for other children. And so, we run a program each year. It's called Christingle program. It's about hope, and children raise the how do I put it? They take on board the fact that other children are having a tough time, and they get excited about that, and they want to do something about it. So it's something about inspiring children to believe that they have a voice that can make a difference themselves in this as well, and they can be firing off emails to their MP demanding action and change. That actually our country shouldn't be like this. So that's the first thing, is I think schools can step into that space and provide that leadership in a community where very few other organisations have got that capacity or that resource. And in terms of partnership with us, anytime anyone wants to do that, drop us a line. We'd be very happy to see what we can do together and what resources we've got that we can help provide schools in terms of children's well-being and children thriving. We'd be very happy to have those conversations.
Well, I think you're going to have them because there is a lot of interest on the message board about this. Some people said, we'd like to help, what do you need? Somebody else has said, how can we develop a partnership with the Children's Society? How do we step into that? How do we go about it? So is that...
I'll take that back and talk to my team. We're in the middle of writing the next stage of our strategy. So that if people have things think they might find helpful from us, drop me a line. mark.russell@children'ssociety.org.uk, and we'd be very happy to have that conversation.
That's really great. Thank you very much. The challenge of working with children who are in deep poverty looks like it's going to get worse. Well, it is going to get worse. And you know this, and you face, therefore, with the Children's Society, very deep challenges yourselves. What are you doing for yourself to keep your own resilience and optimism and that of the staff that you work with and for?
That's a brilliant question and a really tough one. I'm trying to put in practice the advice I gave everybody earlier. So to ensure that I'm, as a leader, taking time to look after myself and to get my work-life balance right and not burn my candle at all four ends, to do things that give me life. I'm surrounded by an extraordinary team, some of whom are listening to me today on this call. I'm surrounded by an extraordinary team of brilliant, talented, committed, hardworking people. But I guess I used to think I was an optimist. And then I read an article by a writer I have a lot of respect for called Rebecca Solnit. And Rebecca Solnit said, optimists and pessimists have one thing in common. They believe they don't have to do anything to make a difference. The optimist doesn't do anything because it's all going to get better, and the pessimist doesn't because it's all going to get worse. Solnit argues that the world is changed by hope-filled people who dare to believe that the actions that they take today will affect change tomorrow. And I dare to say that in my darker moments, when I look at the scale of the challenge in front of us, A, in terms of the increasing numbers of children in desperate need, and B, that the world is changing on a daily basis, that none of us have ever been here before. And how the heck are we meant to lead an organization through this complexity and through this fog? When I get overwhelmed by that sometimes, I remember the call to be a hope-filled person. And I am hopeful on a number of things. Number one, I'm hopeful in young people. Our research shows that yes, young people's well-being is going down, and yes, their lives are getting harder. But actually, what our research shows is that young people are incredibly resilient. And I'm remarkably hopeful in young people. They've told us that despite the challenges they face, they are filled with hope. And number two, I am filled with hope because there are people on this call and there are people on our team who have dedicated their lives to make it better. And that makes it even more important that in the months ahead, we pull together, that my team and schools and the folk in this call, we pull together and we pull in one direction to try and make a difference on all of this. Look, I come from Northern Ireland. When I was growing up, bombs were going off every other week and people were being murdered and killed. That doesn't happen today. Why? Because we saw change. I believe we can affect change. We can make change happen, and change can change for everyone. So our voice is strong. We're going to call for the kind of change we want to see in the world, but more importantly, we're going to live it.
Well, that's pretty inspiring stuff, Mark, I might say. And I can see you said we've got people on the call today who are like you. They share that sort of passion. That doesn't mean they're not capable of being inspired by someone like you, because I know they are. I know everybody listening today has been inspired by this. But we've got an example from Marino, for instance, who's already, is saying, well, look, we can't do all of the things. We can't do the campaigning that you do and so on, but we can change the culture or affect the culture of our trust. And they are doing something, for instance, with a community outreach program with 115 parent volunteers. So that is great.
That's fabulous.
That we're going to close in just a minute. But before we do, we've had an interesting one here, which you can answer briefly, but completely different matter, which is you've referred to your team a lot. And your team has got a huge task. Somebody would just like to know what key roles you've got around you and how you approach the task. What's the team?
Well, we're a charity first and foremost, so we are governed by a board of trustees who oversee what we do. But my immediate team around my exec team around me are all brilliant. I lead a predominantly women-centered team, which is great. We have people from different ethnicities and sexualities. So we've got there's me. Joe is our director of engagement and income generation. So Joe oversees our relationships with our supporters, how we inspire them, to motivate them to use their voice and their money and their time to affect change, and also raise the cash to help us run the organization. We need about 40 million every year to help make the thing work. So we've got Joe, we've got Liz, who oversees our finance and corporate services, who oversees our network of 106 shops around the country. We've just started to reopen, which help us raise a quarter of our income and all our property and all that sort of legal stuff. Then we've got Dara, who I think is on this call, who's brilliant, another Celt like me. And Dara, she leads our frontline work for about 350 staff who work with young people all around the country. And she's fabulous as well. And then we've got Michelle, who's our most recent recruit, who joined us, who we onboarded in this virtual world. She joined us in April, who heads our people teams. So Michelle is our director of diversity and talent. So we wanted to name out loud the two things we wanted to do better at. We want to be more diverse as an organization, and we want to grow and develop our talent and our teams better.
Great. Thank you for that. Well, you have set out a really big challenge for us, Mark. We know the scale of it, but you've put figures to it. You've given us the texture with the story of Ali and others. You've also told us about some of the solutions that you see, such as campaigning for access to technology, to school uniform, making sure free school meals are there, and so on. And for us in schools, you've emphasised the importance of establishing the culture, creating that safe and loving culture where aspirations, experience, well-being and achievement are interlinked. They go hand in hand. And maybe most importantly from this, we know we can change lives for children one click on the dial at a time. It's been absolutely great having you here. I know people will have gained an awful lot from it. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a privilege.
Thank you.